Good evening, everybody. For the sake of streaming, it's members to my left and guests to my forward, and of course, we've got members, 4 members on the face of the camera. Okay. I'd like to say, I know I'm going to say it again, but I'd still like to congratulate Jane on a British Empire Medal Award. So I'd like to say I'm still waiting to see this award. I will see it, but I think it's good. Virtual award. No, it's not a virtual. I will do the check-in. Thank you. We'll kick off with apologies for absence and substitutions.
Chairman, we've got apologies from Councillor James Codling.
Thank you. Number 2, minutes of the last meeting, pages 1 and 4. We have to agree those. Do we agree? All? Yep. Okay, thank you. Any declarations of interest? Nope. Nope. Okay, thank you. Number 4, questions on notice to pursue it to the Council Procedure 38. I believe there is none, is there?
Chairman, no, there are no questions.
There are none. Thank you. I've got 5, report of the portfolio holder of housing issues in the district, external partners. Can I hand that over to you, please, Keith?
Thank you, Chairman. Just it's on the committee has an approved work programme, and it has asked for the issue of housing issues in the district to be looked at and how it impacts on residents and the social and mentally and financially, and the struggle of finding somewhere to live on low or no wages. And the aim of the inquiry was to help inform the committee on the delivery of policies to assist with quality housing supply to meet need. You have before you a report that has been prepared by officers, Tim Clark, the Assistant Director, and Peter Russell, the Executive Projects Officer. I'm sure Peter will introduce those that have been invited to the meeting to support your inquiry, and we also have Councillor Paul Honeywood, the portfolio holder for housing, here today to answer any questions that the committee may have. So, Chairman, I think it's over to Peter Russell.
Thank you, Peter.
Is that better? Yeah. Okay, thank you. And thank you for the invite to come and meet with you tonight as well. What we want to focus on today with our presentation is look at how we work with external partners to resolve housing issues in the district and how this can help deliver and improve housing for all our residents. Housing certainly plays a key role in addressing the health and well-being of all our residents, be they owner-occupiers, tenants, or indeed those who find themselves homeless. And poor housing or lack of housing can seriously impact on our residents' social, mental and financial well-being. In October last year, we adopted our housing strategy, so it's just over a year old, and the strategy sets out the housing challenges that we face in the district. The strategy highlights 4 key priorities for the council, which are delivering homes to meet the needs of local people, reducing and preventing homelessness and rough sleeping, making the best use of and improving existing housing, and supporting people in their homes and communities. What we'll look at tonight is how the partnership work is being undertaken under each of those priorities, and I'm pleased that some of the partners that we work with have agreed to come to the meeting tonight to give you an overview of the work they do in the district in partnership with ourselves. As I said, our strategy was adopted last year at a time when we were facing a number of national and local challenges, notably the COVID-19 pandemic. and we're determined in our community leadership role to work with our statutory and non-statutory partners to deliver the priorities in the housing strategy. In terms of delivering homes to meet the needs of local people, this is a key priority for us. Our allocations policy retains a residency requirement for the majority of applicants, so applicants cannot apply for housing unless they've lived in the district for at least 3 years. And following the adoption of the strategy, we also adopted a housing acquisitions and development policy to facilitate the delivery of new council homes in the district. And whilst we're keen to add to our own stock, and it's a huge priority for us, we also work with other registered providers, Homes England and developers to deliver new affordable homes in the district. There are currently 26 registered providers and charitable trusts operate in the district, and we work with all of them. And they own just over 2,500 properties between them. Since the strategy was adopted, we've seen an increase in the number of new homes delivered in the affordable sector, and the numbers are set out in the report that you have. Since the postponement of the meeting that we were due to have on the 20th of December, I can advise that we've completed on the transfer of one new additional dwelling, which is a 2-bedroom bungalow in Orchard Gardens, Kirby Cross, and Cabinet also gave permission in December to proceed to complete on a further two 2-bedroom bungalows and a 3-bedroom house in Clacton-on-Sea. Whilst the figure quoted in the report is more than what was delivered in the previous 4 years, it's still not quite meeting the targets as set out in the local plan. And it should also be borne in mind that for each, we've delivered these new homes, but we've also lost 12 through tenants exercising their right to buy. And I must advise as well that we currently have over 1,400 households on the housing register, so there still remains a high demand for housing. We're also engaging with the small and medium enterprise development sector to deliver new homes in the district. In December 2020, we were one of 3 councils selected to take part in a national pilot scheme to engage with the SME sector and to try and bring forward small sites in the district for council housing. Following that pilot, Cabinet agreed to continuously engage with small and medium enterprise developers going forward, and that we will soon be seeking tenders from that sector to deliver up to 20 dwellings on the site of the former Honeycroft sheltered housing scheme in Lawford. We have ongoing discussions with other SME developers to deliver housing on sites in Dovercourt and Wicks, and officers have recently carried out an appraisal of land owned in the housing revenue account where additional council housing can be delivered. We also see delivering rural housing as a priority, and we've facilitated and funded through government grant the creation of community land trusts, and we work with the Rural Community Council of Essex to establish rural housing need. We now have community land trust established in Jaywick Sands, Great Oakley and Thorpe Le Soken, and with the latter two it was local ward members who played a key role in helping those trusts established. In partnership with the trusts and the RCCE, we're currently funding housing needs surveys in the parishes, and whilst delivering rural housing is a priority, it will only deliver small numbers. And as such, we continue to work with our external statutory partners to deliver larger strategic sites in the district, such as the Garden Community on the Tendring-Colchester border and Hartley Gardens in Clacton-on-Sea. One of the other priorities in the strategy was to reduce and prevent homelessness and rough sleeping. There's a statutory duty on us to have a homeless strategy, and we adopted one last year. Prior to adopting the strategy and as part of our consultation process, we hosted a homelessness stakeholder event here at the Town Hall, where over 30 partner agencies were invited to give their views on tackling homelessness in the district and to help formulate the strategy. The strategic priorities in the homeless strategy are earlier intervention and education, better partnership and holistic working, increasing the supply of suitable accommodation, and exploring new ways to prevent and tackle rough sleeping. Although it's a statutory duty for the council to prevent, relieve homelessness, we have to work with external partners to ensure we can meet these duties. Following the introduction of the Homelessness Reduction Act, there's now a duty to refer placed on statutory partners to refer clients to the council who are going to be homeless. And the Homeless Code of Guidance that we have to have regard to states there's a duty for other agencies to reasonably cooperate with us in discharging all our homeless functions. I set out in the report quite a number of the key partners that we work with to tackle homelessness and rough sleeping. You have the statutory partners that are listed there, from central government to the police, Essex County Council, etc. There are other agencies that are funded, not statutory agencies per se, but funded by the statutory sector, and also a long list of the voluntary and charitable organisations that we work with to tackle homelessness. You'll see from that one of the agents we work with in helping to tackle and prevent rough sleeping is Anglia Care Trust. And I'm pleased tonight that Ivan Briggs is joining us online to give a small presentation on the work that Anglia Care Trust carry out in the district to tackle rough sleeping and homelessness. Over to you, Ivan.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. My name's Ivan Briggs. I'm the Operations Manager for Anglia Care Trust. Anglia Care Trust has been providing services to individuals for over 50 years. Initially, the charity was set up to assist offenders, but over the years, the charity has evolved, growing to provide services in 3 specific areas. The first one is community safety, so we help people feel safe, and those sort of services are drug and alcohol recovery outreach, domestic abuse outreach. We have a multitude of housing services we provide, and effectively that's helping people keep a roof over their heads. We do a lot of advice and guidance and advocacy, so we help people to be heard. So we run an appropriate adult service when people end up in police custody. We assist them, and we also have a money advice service within that, amongst other services. We currently provide 2 services in tendering. One is our temporary housing scheme, and the other one is the rough sleeper outreach scheme. The temporary housing scheme has been working in tendering since 2015. The scheme provides 7 bed spaces for referrals from the housing options team. And we receive funding via housing benefit and grants from local organisations. This service for the 7 beds, we provide 2 days support a week, but that position is half shared with or partly shared with the rough sleeper outreach, so we've always got some presence in the area. The rough sleeping outreach service was a grant or a bid that we applied for, I believe in May 2020, or may have been previous to April 2020. It's ministry funding, and it's a value of £72,500. That provides 2 staff doing rough sleep outreach work. One works 5 days a week, the other works 3 days a week. We started the rough sleeper outreach work in July of 2020, and that was in the middle of lockdown. And both of these services have a coordinator and operational manager, and some here tonight. Just some of the statistics. All 7 tenants within the temporary housing cohort are tendering district council referrals. And effectively, we have had a reduction. We originally had 10 bed spaces in tendering, but we've lost 3. We are currently looking for new properties. Since September 2019, we've had 6 positive move-ons from tendering, from the temporary housing properties. The rough sleeper outreach service, as I say, has been working since July 2020, and since then, up until the end of November, we've assisted 101 individuals to access accommodation. And that's predominantly through good partnership with tendering housing options team and other agencies. During COVID, we were one of the few organisations that didn't actually lock down. We continued to work throughout lockdown, and we still had a presence on the streets within tendering. Accommodation services, we continue to regularly visit our clients. Big area of frustration during the lockdown was a lot of agencies that we needed to assist our clients had locked down and weren't providing any services at all. So it was a very difficult period for us. We have been honoured through this process, particularly in Suffolk, the High Sheriff of Suffolk has actually provided us with 2 awards for working during COVID period and not actually shutting down. What works well and what doesn't work well within tendering? On the rough sleeper outreach area, the biggest difficulty we have is housing under 35s, because basically nearly all the accommodation we can find is around £100 a week. Due to benefit restrictions, they would only be able to access the shared room rate, which is £74.34. So they have to then make up the difference, which is obviously an additional cost for them and sometimes way beyond their reach. The other areas what works really well is having the SOS bus meeting place, obviously with offices and community hubs closed. That it gives us a space where we can meet other agencies and we can interagency work. From the rough sleeper service, the areas that we have problems is there's light on landlords and not enough HMO provision to find accommodation for individuals, although my team do really well. The temporary housing service movement is very slow once we've got clients ready to move on due to lack of housing and very slow move-ons. We would ideally like some nominations, maybe 2 a year, so that we can move people on. And we would ideally like to expand the service, provide more accommodation in the area, because demand exceeds what we're able to offer at the moment. Final note, as a council, I work with different councils, district councils and borough councils. I can honestly say that tendering is the best councils that I work with. Very cooperative, very, very good in providing us with information, excellent partnership work, and always willing to look at other options and other ideas with us. So really good council to work. That concludes my presentation. Any questions?
It's Ivan Briggs. Sorry? Ivan Briggs? Ivan Briggs. Yeah, yeah, okay. If someone's got a mic on, can you tell me what? Thank you very much. Thank you. I don't want to be, you know. Okay, we can do questions at the very end, I think. That would be a good idea, yeah? Yep, if so. Thank you. Thank you, Ivan. Thank you very much.
That's not a problem.
Thank you. Right. What goes next?
Okay,
Sorry, back to Peter.
Back to me. Yeah. Thank you. So yeah, as you can see from Ivan, we've worked well with Anglia Care Trust in tackling those issues around rough sleeping. I just thought I'd give you another good example of where we've worked with a number of partners. Is around domestic abuse, and a recent example of good partnership working was that we, in a sense, joined a consortium of other local authorities in Essex, Colchester, Malden, Braintree and Chelmsford, to apply for funding from central government to help address domestic abuse in the district, and we were successful in getting the funding, and that funding has allowed us to employ a domestic abuse practitioner in our area for the first time, and that person's employed by Next Chapter, who are one of the partner organisations we work with. Moving on, making the best use of and improving existing housing is a key priority for the council. Last year we adopted a houses and multiple occupation policy with landlords and letting agents cooperatively to improve standards in this sector and to tackle unlawful properties. We certainly, our view is a lack of cooperation leads to enforcement action. We've also commissioned a housing condition survey in Jaywick Sands, funded by central government, which will inform how we can improve housing conditions and the energy efficiency of homes in Jaywick Sands in partnership with statutory and non-statutory partners. As I said, improving existing stock is a key priority for the Council, and I've invited tonight Richard Priest from Priest Property Consultants, who'll give you a brief presentation on the work he's undertaken sourcing accommodation in the district and improving accommodation. Over to you, Richard.
Good evening, everybody. I've got a PowerPoint thing, it's mainly for my benefit, really, so I don't forget where I was going to go. My name is Richard Priest. My background's social housing, man and boy. I used to work with Peter when he was a young, fresh-faced officer in the council. And my background was mainly housing associations, Family Mosaic. I was a director for care and support for Peabody for many years. And one of the things that dawned on me was we had a slight opportunity to try and do something different. This is just, can you just check that for me? That one? This one?
Might be the distance. Probably how far away we are. Do you want me to?
I can move if you like.
If you don't.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I could do, could I? Oh. Right, thank you. Cheers, Kevin. Thank you. So, yeah, I've had the opportunity to work with lots of local authorities in Essex, especially tendering, and used to working with supporting people and grants from Homes England, etc. Charity background and so on. So why a consultant? There's another pot of money out there from the private sphere, which some of you no doubt will be aware of. And pension funds have recognised that social housing is a pretty safe bet. There's a housing crisis. There's likely to be a housing crisis when we're all in our graves. And if they invest in social housing, they will see a modest return, a safe return. And so they're investing considerable sums with partner agencies around the UK. And my frustration, if I'm completely honest, was that even working for a big organisation like Peabody with a £100 million surplus, they were very much focused on general needs housing, and the most vulnerable were really kind of getting overlooked. And a lot of housing associations had their own targets to meet, and doing the rough and dirty side of social housing is expensive and time consuming, and you can't get much done. But if you're focusing on a big housing estate, so your resources have to be harboured carefully. So, you know, we all know that homelessness has been here around for centuries. You know, William Peabody, you know, we're talking hundreds of years, nothing's really changed. Demand's still outstripping supply. And if you look at, you know, historical data to current models, you know, it's unlikely that we're going to see a solution to homelessness in the near future. Old models are helping, but they're not delivering on their own. And so we've got local authorities trying to develop again, and that's great to hear. But it's going to take them time to get some steam behind them and get a bit large delivery. Housing associations are doing their bit, but they're not really doing as much. Private developers are doing some, but whether it's really working for the benefit of the most vulnerable people that we're talking about is arguable. So funding, supporting people, that money, as you know, has been ring-fenced and is shrinking year on year now in real terms. Housing associations, you know, are asked to basically try and fill the development gap, so they're not focusing on their, in my opinion, purely on their true social purpose entirely. And local authorities are often left holding the baby with big waiting lists and in fact, growing waiting lists in many cases. So, very quickly, REITs. They're effectively vehicles used to seek investment from pension funds. And we're talking hundreds of millions of pounds of regulated money in the UK every year. I've spent some money here in tendering with a charity. We've developed last year, we took over a grotty HMO, which was badly run. There was drugs, dealing, prostitution, cuckooing, all sorts going on there. The landlord lived in London. He'd only visited the place once. We bought it with an investment from a REIT. I happen to know where the money came from. I'm not supposed to say, but I'll tell you anyway because it's interesting. That came from the Marks and Spencer's pension fund. We invested quite a considerable sum of money bringing the accommodation, reconfiguring it, making them self-contained studios, bring them up to modern standards, and had a partner with a local charity who then does the housing management, looks after them and takes on the responsibility in the long term, supports those people, and of course has got all the connections in tendering that you would want them to have. So obviously this money is regulated by the Financial Services Authority, so there's a great deal of oversight. It's not funny money from Russia or anything. But the challenges of getting this money spent is quite considerable. I've been all over the country, visited 70 local authorities in person, got in the door, sat down in rooms like this and said, how do you like a chunk of £100 million? And they all nod, so that sounds fantastic, but very, very few of them actually get to a point where we can do something. Tendering was a little different, and I think the previous gentleman mentioned it, that there's a much more friendly, collegiate approach. And through having a conversation with Peter and Tim and others, I was able to use a Field of Dreams approach, build it and they will come, with some assurances from them. I was able to give the REITs enough confidence that we could do something here in tendering, and we indeed did. To TDC, as I said, open to exploring relationships. We've delivered a successful pilot of taking pretty ropey accommodation and turning it into successfully well-managed accommodation. There's still a big pot of money that tendering could get its hands on. And what's the catch? Well, that's why with the sort of thing that I come in, there's a lot of bits of people and organisations you've got to pull together. You've got to get the REIT on board, local authority. You've got to get a housing provider or a charity on board. You've got to get a developer on board and make all of those things happen. And that's where I moved into this space, to make that thing happen. Because if you don't have someone in the middle pulling them all to the centre, it's tricky. But if you get all those conditions right, there is an opportunity for tendering to target poorly run HMOs, which has got plenty of. Get out the dodgy landlords, not the genuine buy-to-let investors who are doing it small scale, but those who are buying big blocks and they're just sitting there dilapidating, and there's antisocial behaviour and no support for vulnerable people. So there is an opportunity to improve some of the stock and even reconfigure it and make it much more suitable for the future. So the possibilities of partnership work and creativity are endless. Not aimless, it should say endless, I'm sorry about that. Provided we can get past conservatism without the capital C, getting past the fear of new ideas, using money that local authorities are not used to accessing, working around local authority policies and procedures that often haven't thought about this type of thing. So often there's a gap in the policy somewhere where we're thinking, oh, can we do that? And that's one of the big things I've come across time and time again. And then having a healthy risk-taking attitude, because there's every partner in this collective wants something out of the arrangement. And I'll stay, of course, to the end to answer any of your questions.
Thank I don't know if we're swapping over boards, but I think it's Gavin is next. Is that correct? Okay. You've got a presentation? Yeah. Right. We're ready.
Does Peter want to say something before?
Sorry?
Does Peter want to say something?
Oh, yeah. Sorry, Peter. Did you want to say something before?
Yeah, I was just going to continue and sort of lead up to Gavin.
Oh, sorry.
No, so thank you, Richard.
Sorry, Gavin, I haven't got a script this in.
So as I said, one thing I've highlighted in the report was that we, as you're all aware, the council's declared a climate emergency with a aim to reach net zero carbon by 2030. We're working in partnership with Department of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, energy company, South East Local Energy Hub to deliver affordable warmth, schemes in the district to tackle fuel poverty and improve energy efficiency. We also work in partnership with Essex County Council and other partners to deliver disabled facilities grants and discretionary loans to vulnerable residents, which certainly helps improve the health and well-being of our residents and can help actually reduce the burdens on our partners in the NHS and social care. The final priority in the housing strategy is supporting people in their homes and communities. Our view is that good health begins in the home, and therefore it's vital our residents can be supported in their homes and in their communities. As a landlord, we work with partners such as the Tendring Community Safety Partnership to tackle antisocial behaviour in our stock, which can have a detrimental effect on our residents' mental health. Our older persons team supports older residents in sheltered housing in the wider community and works with statutory and non-statutory partners to ensure our residents receive the support they need to lead better lives. We've also worked in partnership with the Home Office, Local Strategic Migration Partnership, Essex County Council and Essex Integration to house some Afghan families in the district, and Essex Integration are the support agency who provide that support for them in their home. And I'm now going to hand over to Gavin Cowling, who works for Peabody Floating Support, and he'll give you an overview of the work his organisation does in the district.
Good evening, councillors. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about my organisation and our role within Tendring District and our working relationship with the council. So I work for a housing association. It's quite traditional that housing associations have provided floating support since 1994. Essex County at the time in 94 was dealing with, I believe, 22 to 26 different providers. So come 1997, they amalgamated and they went for smaller contracts. I was part of that process. I was employed by Swan Housing Association. I've been 2P to One Housing Group, and now I've been 2P to Peabody Housing Association, or Peabody Trust. So it's a contract that's ongoing, paid for by Essex County Council via the government, central government funding. It comes out the same sort of pot as sheltered accommodation, huge money, those sorts of things. As we heard from Richard, it was ring-fenced, but it lost the ring-fencing. So it's not tenuous, not when you regard, in regards to Essex County's view of our support and our work we do. But for example, an authority such as Cornwall decided that they didn't want to invest in floating support. And I'm sure they're feeling the pinch now with obviously the Rough Sleeper initiative. So that's our funding stream is usually for 5 years plus 2. So since 1997, Essex County Council have funded us. Our structure in Tendring District is I manage a team of 11 people, 10 full-timers, 37.5 hours each. And one part-timer, 16 hours.
Sorry, Gavin, can I ask you what exactly is floating support?
Right, I was going to... Yeah, we jumped to that bit then. So the aim of floating support is to basically take people without housing status, either homeless, to housing status, take people who are struggling with their tenancies or struggling in their own homes to continue to maintain that housing. And we do this in a practical sense. So we're not mental health specialists, we're not physical health specialists. What we do is practical things, which is maximising benefits, assisting them with debt management, budgeting, if they're isolated, trying to get them, encourage them to embrace the wider sort of community. So that's the basis behind it. It's to prevent homelessness, basically, and to take those people in a homeless position to housing status, with the help of Anglicare Trust and Richard's scheme as well. So we work in partnership with lots of agencies. We take referrals from the person themselves who needs the support. We take referrals from probation, adult social care, Tendring District Council, of course, the housing associations that obviously provide the housing in this area. So that's what we aim to do, and we provide on a weekly basis, around about 236 customers support. So full-time member of staff has 22 customers, and it's pro rata.
Is that in tendering?
In tendering, yeah.
Okay.
So there's, on the books at the moment, there will be 236 customers across that 11 staff team. So we're providing about just short of 400 hours of support to those people in the tendering area, or district rather. Just short of 400 hours. COVID has obviously impacted upon us in both positive and negative way. What we like to do to deliver that support, the floating support, is that we come to your home, we deliver the support in your own home, or somewhere in the community if you're homeless, like one of the drop-ins such as Embrace or M-Fold. I'm sure you're familiar with those. And what's happened with COVID is obviously the company were very cautious about obviously staff being exposed to these illnesses and customers. So it wasn't just about the staff, it's about the customers as well. So what's happened is it's with the 2 lockdowns and this minor, this minor lockdown, I guess you'd call it, it's essential visits only. Welfare visits, because obviously the police are stretched, a number of services are quite stretched when it comes to actually checking on people's welfare. So we do welfare visits, essential visits. We're picking up documents, dropping off documents to the council, so on and so forth. Lots of PPE, staying safe. But one of the positives has been that actually I've been able to give more customers to my staff, because phone support has proven successful, although a little bit more, it takes longer to deliver that support. I think that's really and obviously for the staff, home working has been a benefit because they haven't had to come to an office. It's all been reduced overall, the office contact. What works well for us with the council, obviously we've been working with the council. Prior to 97, I believe there was 1 floating support worker that was part-time working in tendering. So in 1997, that went up to 8. It went up in... it was you! Sorry. So, obviously, what I want to convey is that we're quite well established now, and there's been a fluctuation in numbers of the support and hours that we provided in this district. It peaked with 1 housing group with 14 members of staff, full-time members of staff, and now currently, as I've said, it's 11, 10 full-timers and 1 part-timer, 3 days a week. But I think we provide an invaluable service, and we complement a lot of statutory bodies. We do a lot of signposting, and if we can't do the job, basically we'll put you in touch with someone who can. There are additions to the service that we provide, which is that we're now one of the partners with Essex County Council Winter Households funding. So we're providing bedding, white goods, topping up fuel bills because of the fuel poverty is a real issue at the moment. I'm sure we've all felt the pinch, not just people who've on a very low income or on benefits. So that's one source of funding we have where we can help people immediately, because the Essential Living Fund are very limited now, a very limited amount of goods for those people, possibly a bed and cooker. So we've got that source of funding, and also Peabody has £16,000 that they give to to Essex. So we have our own thing, and what we've done with that is we've looked at providing people with identity so that they can get access to the benefits, they can get access to different sources of funding. We've also complemented some discretionary housing payments where the removal costs haven't been quite covered by tendering district council. So, I mean, that has been something that's quite rewarding for the staff and the customer because it's a cushion. So, obviously, we can top things up, which I think is a great benefit. And that's come from Peabody itself. Not that money's not come from the government. That money's not come from an external source.
Gavin, can I ask you another question
Certainly
before you go on? How do we contact you? Have you got a website or?
We've got both website, we've got you can text a referral to us, you can phone a referral, there's an 0800, 0300 number. There's also what we find is that the staff member who's worked with somebody 3 years ago, they've still got their number, so they'll give them a call. So we are contactable. It's very simple to make a referral. Obviously, if you self-refer, then that's fine. But if a partner refers someone, then obviously we expect that that person has consulted the person they're referring, and then we're happy to discuss some of those support needs with that referrer.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, Kevin. Thank you. Carry on anyway. Where you were. Sorry, but
yeah. I mean, just moving on to what works well. Obviously, we're quite well established now. I've known Peter for a good many years, and I like to consider him a friend now. We have a great working relationship. You know, we do meet on a regular basis. We work exceptionally well with the allocations team, Cathy Lowe's team. The Homelessness Early Intervention Officer, Debbie Bunce, is exceptional, I will say. She's fantastic. She has a great working relationship with the whole of the team. They've been invited to peer groups. Council tax, we work well with John's team and Jason Brown. Obviously, shelter accommodation, Dee Fenton Jones, we've got a good working relationship. We have a great working relationship with the environmental services. Grant is a go-to. What would work better for us, there was what I'd like to see is there was an initiative back in 1999 with tenancy startup packs, and I just think the Citizens Advice Bureau have come up with this, where they had a little booklet about go-to people or organisations. If you're struggling with alcohol or drug issues, you go to, you know, they'd signpost you to open. So it's like a little signpost book. The actual tenancy sustainment programme was a bit more involved than that. And what we attempted to do was to engage new tenants, council tenants that have been given them obviously a property and they were new to having a tenancy, never had a tenancy before. Was a kind of a classroom type affair, which just didn't get any take-up. But I think what would benefit new tenants to the council would be some just guidance, which is, you know, what should you pay the first, you know, which is your rent. What is not so important is your phone bill. I mean, if you're struggling, you know, just obviously, you know, it's guidance rather than advice. But people make their own choices. But I think if we could revisit that and work with the council on coming up with some, you know, just a simple little, perhaps A5 piece of paper. When you sign your tenancy, you get a little bit of paper that says, if you're struggling, please ring Peabody, please ring, Open Road, or some of the other sort of Health in Mind. I think it would help the council in a number of ways. I think it would, one, you know, obviously show that this council cares about their tenants, and also, if push comes to shove, if you do have to evict a tenant for whatever reason, you can actually demonstrate to the court that you've actually done as much as you possibly can to assist this person to maintain their tenancy. I would like to see a better working relationship for Peabody with the estates managers. I know Matthew, but I haven't really managed, because of this last 2 years has been mayhem, and it's been a very strange time for all of us, and I think we've all had to adapt very quickly, and obviously everyone accepts change in varying degrees, and it's been change upon change. But I would like to cement a better relationship with the estates managers, because obviously we are a professional organisation. The staff are professional, and we don't collude with customers. We state the facts and the truths with regards to universal credit, etc. And lastly, one of our points of delivery, we offer 3 streams of support. So stream 1 is face-to-face, it's immediate, something that can be done there and then, may take 20 minutes, may take a day. Stream 2 is 4 to 6 weeks, and stream 3 is up to 6 months. So we're a short-term service now. But part of that service, particularly the stream 1, was where we provided drop-ins. So we worked with Job Centre Plus in Harwich and Clacton. We were at the council offices two days a week, but obviously that stopped with COVID. And again, we're not working at the food banks anymore because of the COVID situation. But I would appreciate your help with establishing a base in the future when we move forwards and past this pandemic in Brightlingsea. We're going to re-establish a base in Jaywick, drop-ins for the Jaywick residents with the Job Centre Plus's support, but it's Brightlingsea I've never been able to crack. With the food bank, sorry, is that your area, Jane? Jane, to help me out. No, so we were working, because the food bank in Brightlingsea is actually linked to Colchester Food Bank. So we did work there for a very short period. But, you know, I'm not saying they're civilians, but they're just normal people who are good, you know, good-natured and have a good big heart. But we didn't have anywhere private to discuss things, and I think it's very difficult. I mean, my view of, I'm going off the point a bit, but I firmly believe that food banks, Walton Food Bank should be run by the people who would volunteer at Brightlingsea, and Brightlingsea should be, because for people who live in that community, it's a very small town, as is Walton, as is most of the towns in Tendring district along the coast, aren't they? And I just think it's very difficult for residents to actually go in there and perhaps see someone they might have seen at the fish and chip shop or in the shops. But, I mean, yeah, if you can help, I'd love to chat to you afterwards, Jane, if we could. Because we did make some inroads with the college, you know, with the school, but unfortunately the pandemic hit and then it all just, you know, fizzled out. Thank you very much for your time. I'm done.
Thank you, Gavin. Peter, do you want to say anything?
I think now would be a good time for questions. So,
Thank you. Ivan, are you there? Can you put your camera back on, please? Thank you.
I'm here.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, we're open. I think Jane wanted to say something.
I was just going to answer Gavin basically to say I work quite closely with the food bank, although I'm not part of the food bank. I do welfare at Brightlingsea, so particularly work quite a lot with the housing department also. And if you want to meet up down there, whether it be on a food bank morning, we have got individual private rooms as well, or we can, you know, just give you a separate day to the food bank. So.
Thank you, Jane. Any more questions? Yeah. Delith?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say to Peasbody, I've worked with people in my ward in water that has received quite a lot of support from you. And I have to say, I know
Flip it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, you know, thank you to Peasbody, really, because it does help. And I think probably they've contacted me just as additional support, really. I see you as the experts, but I'm there. I met with them, just take an interest, and one or two of them have had additional needs and been bullied and etc. So it's nice for them to be able to talk to somebody in the town or whatever. But what I would also like to bring up is with Richard is his issue, if I may. I think I'm not being mischievous here. I think I'm trying to be honest, but most of us are very fearful of HMOs in our wards. I personally am very passionate about housing, if I'm honest, because I think unless people have housing, there is nothing in their lives. Unless you've got a secure home, that's one of the most important functions for people to progress with all the other things. But we are fearful of HMOs simply because of the reputation that they have. And I think, for me, the issue is, and we've had it in Walton recently, actually, where there was an application and then they withdrew it. I don't change their minds. Actually, I've had a message from a developer today, and I haven't got back to him yet because I only picked it up about 5:30 tonight. And I've got a horrible feeling that might be to do with something like HMOs, because he's talking about 2 properties or whatever, I don't know. But it's about having reassurance as councillors, because, you know, we have a duty to human nature to have a good home. But it's about ensuring that the quality of those homes are not just adequate, but also that they're maintained, and that no disrespect to individual human beings, but that their behaviours and conducts as tenants, and this goes to our own housing as well, it goes across the board, housing associations, everything. I think we all have a duty of care in the public sector to maintain basic standards of conduct and respect for properties when you do have it funded. And so the comment I'd make is, you know...
Sorry, Councillor Martin, is there a question there, please?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, ask Richard, really, what's his view on that, and what's his experience so far in our area on the HMOs, etc. Because you have referred to
I agree. I don't like HMOs either. So the project that I was referring to is we took a flea pit. A flea pit. It was absolutely awful. It was reconfigured into studios, so you do get a smaller footprint. You less HMO rooms in effect because you're having to rob Peter to pay Paul. But what you get at the end of it is tenants having secure accommodation. Not big accommodation, but it's secure, their own front door, with all modern facilities. You get a partner organisation who's managing it, a partner you're already working with. So, you know, one of the organisations that Peter mentioned, and they're visiting, you know, regularly, every day in some cases. And so, what I was talking about is working with the district to target these. I'm going to use the word slum landlords to target those properties, to offer to buy them off them, because they're normally struggling anyway. They're not getting their rent, they've got constant complaints, and they're a rope around their neck normally, but they just don't know what to do. So I try and target them, get those properties, see if I can get them on them, you know, buy them off market, and then see if we can make those. I do agree, and I've visited lots of HMOs in tendering, and I've seen some really horrible ones. Even now, I'm working on some other stuff with the council. It would take too much time to go into tonight. But there is an opportunity to use this money to improve tendering stock, to remove HMOs, and to turn them into small, self-contained, studio-style accommodation, which is really what the model is. So, yes, I'm targeting HMOs, but I'm not a fan of them. Unfortunately, they're a sign of the times, aren't they?
Can I, Chairman, ask Peter a question, if I may, please?
Yeah. Okay, go.
Just very briefly, I'm currently working with families who are fairly large families. Can you give us an indication at the moment of where we stand in tendering with available accommodation? There's two questions I want to ask you, sorry, Chairman. I'm going to sneak in here. And one is, you know, the number of, how many properties do we have that are sort of 5-bedroomed, for example? Have you got any idea? And what is the ratio of people on the housing register who are looking for that size of property? To give me an indication, only because I'm working quite complex, that's all I say, with the family at the moment. Your staff are doing a fantastic job, and they're specialists, but I'm the backup support again. And the second one is, I need to ask a question about housing that's just cropped up in the last few weeks, because I thought that housing associations got
Sorry,
their...
Dallas, have we got two others waiting? So...
I did say I wanted 2 questions.
Oh, sorry, I
Chairman?
thought you'd done a third.
No, I haven't. I've asked the first question about
Okay,
the numbers of 5 bedrooms versus whatever. My second question is, if you don't mind, housing associations, I've always understood that they get their allocations from us. You know, so therefore, you know, any housing association, we would recommend the tenant to them. But recently, in the last couple of weeks, I've had an example in Wharton of one of the housing associations there, and I can't remember the name of it, where they told some of my residents who were desperate that they're not even aware of them and that they don't have their references. So are there some housing associations that can recruit direct? And if so, how do people register with those housing associations? Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. In answer to the first question, in terms of larger properties, as far as I'm aware, I think we may only have one property in our stock which is 5 bedrooms or more. And that is, in fact, I think it's a 6-bedroom property, because initially it was constructed as 2 houses and it's been knocked through into one. In terms of how housing associations, or registered providers as we call them these days, work, is that when they build a new development, for example, the council gets 100% of what we call nomination rights to those properties. So we select, in a sense, we put forward people to the housing association. The housing association has, of course, has their own policies. They're not bound to accept who we put forward, but they've got to have a good reason for not accepting someone. So it might be that, for example, they've done an assessment and they may think it's unaffordable, or the family perhaps has got a history of antisocial behaviour. They can refuse on those grounds. Generally speaking, housing associations do not keep their own registers. They do not keep their own. They do for their own tenants. So because when the site is built and we get 100% the nomination rights, what normally happens on second lettings, we only get 75%, so that for every 4 properties that become vacant, we nominate to 3, and they can retain 1 to, say, for example, move one of their own tenants who might be overcrowded or might need to move on medical grounds, etc. So they don't tend to have open registers that are available for the public to join unless they're their own tenants, and that's why we, in a sense, maintain the housing register for that purpose.
Sorry, Dallas, I must interrupt. Graham, you should go.
Hello. Thanks. Yeah, I've got quite a few questions actually. So not necessarily answer them tonight, but maybe you can give us answers later on if that's okay. I've written here, well, the first thing is, in an ideal world, you wouldn't be here, because if you weren't here, then there wouldn't be a problem. See, there is. And I must congratulate you all on the presentations you've given tonight. A lot of information, and that sets people thinking, so thank you very much from my point of view. I've got here, start at a lower level, something which Gavin has said about coming into Brightonsea. Maybe we could do that on the other two sectors as well, because I'm aware of houses which have been empty in Brightonsea, 8 apartments, been empty for about 2 or 3 years. So I don't know if there's any room there for us to sort of liaise with you and just to say, well, could we approach the owners and see if there is a possibility to acquire in some way. The other question is, and this is probably for the next item, the corporate plan. I can't actually see homelessness on our corporate plan. This is probably a question for Councillor Honeywood. It could be hidden somewhere in there under housing. I'm not quite sure. But maybe you could check and come back to us and just to sort of see, because obviously with the scenarios we've been faced with tonight, then I think there is a good reason why it should be on our corporate plan. And then the other one, which is probably for Paul as well, is the right to buy. You know, we've said we've lost some houses to the right to buy. Is there any mileage? I know we have spoken in the past about taking houses outside of the right to buy scheme. I didn't know what progress had been in that, or if legislation has changed. I know we were looking at it at one time, but maybe you could come back to us on that. And then I'll bring Ivan in because he's probably feel very lonely up there. But it's a question to everybody really. One of the schemes I've looked at is the Macari Foundation in Stoke-on-Trent. I don't know whether you're familiar with that, where they acquire warehouses and then they put in glamping pods inside. So therefore, that then gives, we talked about identity, giving homeless people identity. It gives them an address for contact. It gives them access to medical care and help. You need an address to get a bank account. You need an address when you go for an interview. And that seems to be very, very successful at the moment. So I'm not quite sure if anybody or any of you are aware of that scheme. And one of the things I thought, which it might be, I don't know why, nothing in particular, but is veterans and they're working with the Royal British Legion. I don't know if there could be a link up somewhere, whether they would, because you get a lot of publicity about ex-servicemen have come on hard times, coming out of the services, and for whatever reason they find the change. And I didn't know whether we could do a link up with that really, and then so to sort of cover all options. So the $64 question is, how can we help? We're saying that it's not on the corporate plan. We're a scrutiny committee. We're scrutinising how the council works. So you've got one wish each. One wish each. What would you want us to do as a scrutiny committee to actually push forward your wish list, if you like?
Gavin?
Obviously be grateful for a base in Brightlingsea, which is first and foremost. It's just one of those towns that, in the last 14 years, I've just not been able to get a foothold in, really. I'd just like a better working relationship with the estates managers, the guys that actually, provide the housing. And because for us, the simple matter of fact is, if you don't get that referral in quick enough, then if we get the referral when they're at point of eviction, then it's a failure. If we get the referral when they start going into arrears, then perhaps we can help. We're not specialists in antisocial behaviour, but we can help move people. So I think I'd like a better working relationship we would like a better working relationship with the estates managers, I think. Every other department's exceptional, really. I think we've cracked them, but it's not through ignorance on anyone's part. It's probably, again, I mean, 2 years we've been held back by this pandemic, I'm afraid. It's there's been positives and negatives, but I will say it's kind of held us back in many respects.
Thank you, Gavin. We can move on. Paul?
Thank you, Chairman. I'll touch on a couple of things with Graham, Councillor Steady, if that's fine. Firstly, there is a little piece in the corporate plan, building sustainable communities. So that might be worth having a quick look at. And then if you want to follow up with any questions or queries, please do. That looks at some of the plans. The other thing I wanted to touch on briefly was a subject, right to buy. I think in the past I've made my views quite clear on right to buy. I think it does give us issues, and certainly as Cabinet Member for Housing, it gives me worries when we financially commit to the funding needed to build, because however you look at it, taking a plunge on investing and then faced with right to buy, it's a risk. The concern is, and I know where you're coming from, but I think it's only right to sort of point out, intentionally avoiding the right to buy is illegal. That's one thing we need to bear in mind. Obviously, if it occurs through one way or another, for example, the council block renting properties from a private landlord, then that's not intentional avoiding the right to buy. But I know councils have looked at different versions of double lease back, triple lease back, to dodge that. But that's just something to bear in mind. And because I thought, well, you've put it on the table, I better, say for those who are not aware, we have to be careful with right to buy. And I'm not a fan of it. Let's leave it at that. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Paul. Can we go to Ivan, please?
Yeah. So sort of wish list from our point of view. Firstly, I'll go and say that the stock that we currently have in tendering are predominantly single bed, self-contained. We have one two-bed shared. So we would like to expand that portfolio. We're aware that demand is high, and effectively we believe we provide a good service. Our biggest frustration, which is what I sort of highlighted in my presentation, was the ability to move people on. We've done our work with individuals. We've got them ready to move them back into the into independent living, and it does seem to take a long time to move those individuals on. And what you do tend to find is people tend to go backwards a bit at that stage. So if we could have some nominations to keep the flow moving, really, because effectively once those people are ready to go, we can move them on. They can become successes within the community, and we can take in more deserving cases and start to work with them. So those would be the sort of two areas that I'd like to work with, really. Then obviously we're aware that the rough sleeper outreach contract is due soon, and effectively hopefully we'll be invited to bid again. And obviously we've had early conversations with Cathy Lowe around that, and we're aware that there's going to be more intervention work, which has already been highlighted today. But I'm a great believer in early intervention, because it costs a lot more to evict somebody and then pick the pieces up at the other end, whereas we could do some intervention work early, sort those rent arrears out, and sort of deal with any antisocial behaviour, and make sure the individual stays where they are and maintain their tenancy. So I'm a great believer in floating support, and my history is, I've worked all over. I've worked in Norfolk, and I've seen floating support dramatically cut. It's an easy one to cut, but the consequences of that is just massive revolving doors. Projects like mine can do all of the work and support somebody, and they can go out in the community, and within about 6 to 8 months to coming back through the door again because they haven't stayed on top of their rent arrears. And it's just sad to see that. So I'll just leave you with those notes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ivan.
I'm not going to meet Paul's eyes here because he's just mentioned it. But the challenge is that you've got this bank of money. So I get a telephone call every week from a fund that says, we've got 100 million to deploy. Have you got any councillors who will sign a lease with us? We can let you loose, you can buy properties, you can do them up. And if the council sign a lease, they can effectively have them as their stock, and there's the right to buy element that Paul mentioned, whether you can get round it. Most believe that you can. Some of the London boroughs have certainly done it. The challenge is, taking aside all the policy-related issues that Paul and his colleagues have to deal with, is I think it's one of I often hear, and this is not tendering, but I often hear is, but what if we don't need these properties and we've signed a 25-year lease or a 40-year lease? And I say, when do you honestly think that the homelessness crisis is going to end? If you look at the projections of build in the UK and the current demand and growth and people coming into the UK as asylum seekers, I mean, it's really not something councils should worry about, but I appreciate they're paid to take sensible decisions on these things. And so my wish is, fervently, tendering on any other council, that could be sensibly, I know Paul has looked at models, but that could be looked at because, you know, you can turn a tap on here in tendering and you could potentially be getting people buying those flea pits in Jaywick, spending money on bringing them up to a good standard, like as was discussed earlier. I think another low quality properties, and they effectively become council stock with council nominations. And if you do have to hold on to them for 20 or 30 years or whatever it might be, it's cost you no money. It's cost you zero. No one's asked the council for money. They're giving you the money to do it. They get their cut from the rent. It's worked out in a certain way. Sort of, they try and rent them to the council sub-LHA, so the council can rent them at LHA, and there's a little bit for the pension fund because that's what they're after ultimately. If you can do that, it gives the council a roadmap because they can think, well, look, we've got 20, 30 years here. We're going to be developing our own stock. Then we can hand this lot back if we don't want it. And really, I think that's what you have to be looking at. You need to be looking at a 20, 30, 40-year roadmap for housing. Because if someone gives, even in Peabody when I worked there and other organisations I've worked for, if someone gives you the thumbs up on a development, 5 years down the line, if you're lucky, you're exchanging keys. And that's with everyone willing and working together to get it done. So housing's a really slow burn. So that's my wish.
Thank you, Richard. Peter, did you want to say anything?
Yeah, I don't necessarily have a wish list, but you know, I think what I would like the committee to recognise is, and I hope we've pointed it out, the very good partnership working that is going on in the district at the moment. It's down to Gavin, Richard, all the agencies we work with, and also the staff who work in the housing team. And just as Ivan mentioned it, we are going through the process of reviewing our nomination agreements, Ivan, and at the moment we've got some providers are given what we call nomination rights. That's a right for them to nominate someone to the council to be housed. Some providers have those rights, others, like Anglia Care Trust, don't currently have those rights because these rights have not been reviewed for many, many years. So we are reviewing them at the moment. I'm just waiting for one provider to come back to me, and then I can establish what we can offer you in terms of nomination rights for the next financial year.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Bill?
Yeah, just observations really. As ward councillors, as you may be well aware, that we work on the face of it of every day. And every single day of my life, I get people phoning me up and asking me to come and have a look at what they're living in. And quite frankly, I mean, I'm a ward councillor over at Parkson, over near Harwich, and quite frankly, I wouldn't live in these places. And I've asked on many occasions, how can we, the council, do they do an inspection, for instance, of that property? Because, and I'm going to use the word, and I know I shouldn't, because road landlords are rife. I went into yesterday with a ceiling in the kitchens on the floor. The council, I asked for a meeting with the landlord or the agent, and they wouldn't give me one. Just before Christmas, there was a flood, and it was disgusting. There was nowhere that we can go as a councillor to try and get private tenants that the council are paying the rent for help. That's a question I'd like to ask, where that help is coming from, and it should be that we should be able to phone a number and say, can you come and look at this property? It needs looking at. These people are living like pigs. They're living in damp, horrible conditions. The second question I'd like to ask is, where I live, the same thing. I've got two families. One is 7 people living in a 2-bedroom house, and they phoned the council, can't do nothing for you. That's what the reply they got. And I've got another six people in a 2-bedroom house, living in cramped conditions, and of course that makes it worse, that makes it damper. These people don't deserve this. They're only human beings after all, but they don't seem to be getting any help. And just one more question, the last thing is, we're talking about rough sleepers. Do we include sofa surfers on that list of what we call rough sleepers? No, you don't, but they are rough sleepers because they're moving about. They're sleeping on one couch one day, a couch another day, etc., etc. Can't get no help. Now, what I'm asking is, where's the help going to come from? So us as ward councillors who deal with it every day can get these people some help.
Peter.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. Certainly the department has a private sector housing team whose job it is to enforce standards in the private sector. I don't know whether the people you're referring to living in the poor conditions have made a complaint to the council, but they should well do, and I can pass on the details of the team to you tomorrow when I'm in normal hours. I think, like I said as well, the new rules came in, I think, maybe about 18 months ago, because a common fear that tenants had in reporting disrepair was that the landlord's response would not be to attend to the repairs, but to serve them with notice to leave. After all, we live in a situation where basically evictions are no-fault evictions. The landlord doesn't have to prove that the tenant has breached the tenancy agreement or anything. They just don't have to do that. And I think Tim might be able to know more of the timeline, but certainly I think 2 or 3 years ago, new rules were brought in about retaliatory evictions. So if a tenant has made a complaint to the council and the council is taking enforcement action against the landlord through the service of an improvement notice, for example, the landlord cannot serve notice in those situations. So the law has slightly toughened a little bit in the tenant's favour. But I would certainly advise that, I'll pass you on the details of the private sector housing team to pass on to your residents. In terms of the other families you mentioned, I think any family, provided they're eligible to join the housing register, I don't know whether they are or not, and certainly they'd have to meet our have lived in the district for at least 3 years rule, they're going to have a high priority for housing. They're chronically overcrowded. What we've got is the chronic shortage of larger properties. Certainly as a landlord, Tendring District Council, I believe we only own 12 4-bedroom properties in the entire district. Just 12. And therefore, the wait for a 4-bedroom or larger property, you're not talking months, you're talking years. Now, we can look to address that through additions within our own stock, etc. But that is a reality of what we face.
Just, can you, all right, then, okay, I understand that, but then the question is, why have we only got 12 four-bedroom houses when obviously there's an increase in families. There's a lot more families out there with 3 or 4 children these days than there is 1 and 2s. And secondly, could you do me a favour? Well, one, I'll ask you, you say you've got a team, a dedicated team to go out and do this. Could you let me know how many you've actually done? Could you tell me that, please?
Sorry, they're not my team.
Thank you, Peter. Tim, would you like to come in there, please?
Thank you, Chair. So I've been sitting here quietly listening. Can you hear me okay? So just to pick up on what Peter's said in response to Councillor Davidson there. So we've got the private sector housing team. They're dedicated really to following up on private sector housing disrepair issues. So they've got a large role in terms of regulating HMOs, which we've talked about earlier this evening. But also we've got a lot of people that come forward and have got issues with their private landlord, disrepair issues of the type that Councillor Davidson has described. And actually it's surprising how many very poor quality properties we are discovering across the district. It really is quite surprising some of the conditions that people are living in. So surprisingly, and worrying at the same time that we've got those issues in the current sort of kind of day and age. So I think we've got on our website, if you go onto the council's website and Google, or not Google, but type in the search engine, housing disrepair, there'll be a form that comes up that you can then fill out. So a tenant can actually make a complaint directly to the council via that route, or there's also a telephone number on there where they can phone in. But just to pick on what Peter said around the retaliatory eviction protection. So really what a tenant needs to do if they've got issues is to report them to the landlord first and do that in writing. That's the best thing to do. And if that doesn't work, so tenant gives them, let's say, 2 weeks to sort the problems out, that doesn't work, then come to us, make the complaint, and then we can follow up. And normally the team will do an inspection with the landlord present, and that then can follow on to initially informal action and potentially enforcement action from there. But the key thing is, if the tenant has already asked the landlord to do the work, then comes to us and we then serve an improvement notice or a prohibition order or something like that, then the tenant is then protected from that retaliatory eviction. But the key thing is that the tenant has to have asked the landlord to do the work first of all. And I think that's now been enforced or in place for about 3 years now, I think. It shows how time flies by. So hopefully that helps. But if not, we can talk to you again tomorrow, Dr. Davison.
Thank you, Tim. Sorry, Jane, I didn't see the list. Okay.
No. Sorry, I'm not certain if that, yes. I was going to say, particularly to some of the comments, that we've had people in Brightlingsea who want to go on the council list and think they should get a place straight away. And the minute we say, have you actually registered? No. Well, you know, why would I do that? Surely I can just get a council house. And then you go through the explaining of it all as to, you know, what they must do. But working with the housing department quite a lot is we've worked quite closely with the rent deposit scheme. We've suggested because of the shortage of council houses, that they perhaps look for a private one, and if they qualify, then the rent deposit scheme's coming in. And I know we've set 4 up recently, last 3 years, in Brightlingsea with this rent deposit scheme, and I think perhaps that needs to be publicised a little bit as well, which will help out.
Right, who we got to go to answer your question? Tim? Sorry, Peter.
Certainly for as long as I've been at working at the district, which is 21 years, we've had financial help available to people in the form of deposits. Nowadays, they tend to be through our discretionary hardship fund, and they're actually paid in the form of grants. So we give someone, we might give them, say, if the monthly rent on a property is £700 a month, we'll give them £700 as a deposit. They're not required to pay that back. It's not a loan, it's there, but we kind of expect that once we've given them that money, if they want to move, they will then be able to take that money with them. So in a sense, they don't come back to us. So, yeah, we've got a long sort of track record of helping people with costs around housing, be it deposits, rent in advance. I think Gavin mentioned removal costs, where we can sometimes pay up to a certain amount. They might fund the rest of it. And, you know, I think it's difficult to get accurate figures on at the moment because of the pandemic, because we've had a lot of various bits of money come in and they've all kind of gone into the one, into a sort of giant pot. But generally, yeah, anyone, for example, who's threatened with homelessness is entitled to financial help to secure alternative accommodation. That's universal. It's not just for families. It's for single people, childless couples, any person at any age. The issue is not so much us giving them deposit. It's actually finding accommodation that they can afford. That is the key issue.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter. Dallas, I can let you go one more question.
Two questions, really. One for Peter.
Can you turn your microphone on, please?
Flipping heck, sorry, my hands are dodgy. Is there a ceiling on the, you know, we're not working currently with a very large family, a couple actually. Is there a ceiling on the age when you could almost say to the family, well, that child is now an adult and therefore should be able to go out and get their own flat independently instead of expecting us to be able to provide a 5-bedroomed or 6-bedroom, 2-bathroomed house, for example, you know, which is the example I'm working on at the moment. The demands are terrifying, if I'm frank with you. You know, is there that sort of ceiling, or would you, and if there is there any way out of it if they register their child with problems, for example?
I don't think there's a ceiling as such, and I certainly wouldn't be wanting to tell a family. And believe me, in my time, certainly in my former role when I was a housing allocations manager, was often accused of saying things like of that nature. When we assess housing need, we have regard to basically ages and the sort of sex of children. And our policy states that if a child gets to the age of 16, regardless of whether boy or girl, they're entitled to their own bedroom. So effectively, you can have, say, mum, 21-year-old, 22-year-old, and 24-year-old. They're entitled to a 4-bedroom house, even though they might choose that if they found a house that they would have an element of sharing. So we assess according to need. And you know, like I said, the issue is just the chronic shortage of larger properties.
And to Anglia Care Trust, really, if I may. I think I've probably worked alongside Anglia Care Trust in my days when I worked in Suffolk County Council. Do you run a service in Suffolk or not, or am I wrong? And were you predominantly then concentrating on a lot of ex-offenders? You know, is that one of the key roles you were doing? People coming out of, because, you know, that is an issue. One of the biggest issues with reoffending is the fact they don't have a secure home to come home from prison to, which then leads to them not getting employment. And it's this constant, you know, cycle, really, isn't it?
It is. The key, Anglia Care Trust started up 50 years ago, and predominantly offenders. Obviously, well before my time. It may not look like it, but it was before my time. But we did have at one point, we recently had the accommodation service within prisons. One of the key thing, we worked within prisons in Norfolk, etc., and looked at accommodating individuals. Unfortunately, we lost that contract to a very large provider. It'll be, people will know who these providers are. And currently, it looks like we may be giving the contract back because it's not gone too well with one of these large providers. But yeah, it is a key thing. And when we had this service, a lot of my different services, I obviously run temporary housing schemes, and I run a drug and alcohol recovery scheme as well in Suffolk. And we've got a lot of other housing. We were able to accommodate a lot more offenders. And that has now dried up because effectively the large providers not providing that work. So it was a really good fit for us. So it's, you know, we're a multifaceted charity, and we have lots of different arms to what we deal with. And I mean, I've worked in very large housing associations before coming to Anglia Care Trust, and when we were effectively one-trick ponies, we were just housing. Whereas with Anglia Care Trust, if I've got somebody who's got a problem with, say, finance, I can refer them to money advice services, etc. You know, we have a domestic abuse unit. We have a multitude of different areas. But yeah, the offender side of it, particularly in Suffolk and Norfolk, is suffering at the moment because this large provider's taken over and not doing too well.
Thank you, Ivan. Someone's still on, aren't they? No? I'd like to ask the chairman's question, if that's okay. When people are evicted, does this leave them in a more difficult position to find further accommodation as they don't have a previous reference?
It certainly can do, I think, depending on the circumstances in which they've been evicted. If, for example, they've been evicted for non-payment of rent or, of course, damage to a property, then that could affect, you know, the reference that their former landlord will give them. What we tend to, I think for us, what we've seen in recent years, which is sort of concerning, is not so much about referencing, but the fact that a lot of letting agents are requiring guarantors for tenants, and the guarantors have to be earning over, I think, £30,000 per year or something, and it's you know, that's a struggle for people to find that guarantor in that situations. So certainly guarantors is a big issue. Referencing, I think it depends on what the previous history was. What we do, in the Housing Solutions team, we've got a dedicated accommodation officer who's to source accommodation, and also, in a sense, to work with, you know, if the landlord does agree to take a referral from the council, if there are issues, it's a point of contact that the landlord's got with the authority. And, you know, on that, we tend to deal with individual landlords in that way, rather than letting agents, and individual landlords don't tend to want guarantors. They kind of want some assurance from the council that there's not going to be problems, and we can't give that 100% assurance, and we are honest with them with that. But from the people we looking to source, you know, accommodation for, you know, if we can do it with individual landlords, it does tend to work better than, say, through the agencies who, they've got to make a living, so they charge fees for guarantor referencing, credit searches, you name it. So yeah, it can affect it depending on the circumstances.
Thank you, Peter. One more to go, please. What happens to people in private rented accommodation when they lose their jobs and can't afford their rent anymore?
Well, generally speaking, if they lose their job, then they will probably be looking to claim universal credit. And through universal credit, they can get a contribution towards their housing costs. The housing costs are local housing allowance rates, which are set by an independent rent officer, and people are paid an allowance according to the size of the household. So if you need a 3-bedroom property for your household, there's a flat rate of I think it might be £700 odd pounds, I can't remember the precise figure, that you get that as basically a flat rate, depending on if your rent's. So if your rent's £850, you've got to make up the difference from your other income. So that, you know, that sort of safety net is there. If people lose their jobs, you know, they can get help with their rent. I think, as Ivan mentioned, one of the big issues is that there are different rules in terms of local housing allowance for people under the age of 35. If you're under 35, you're really sort of stuck with finding what we call accommodation at the shared room rate. So, you know, you wouldn't be able to afford a one-bedroom flat. You have to look at something with an element, perhaps like a studio flat, like Richard referred to, or something like a bedsit in a shared house or shared lodgings, that kind of thing.
Thank you. Just to top up on that, this is one question that I get asked as a councillor. They have the rent to pay, but when they're on benefit, and then comes the top up on private landlords and other landlords, is that ever going to stop? Because it's either a pact of, do we eat, do we turn the heating on, do we pay the rent? I know it's a hard question, Pete, but
no.
I need to ask.
I fully understand it, and I have every sympathy with it. I think what we've seen in recent years is that rents have increased quite dramatically. There used to be, maybe going back, and you guys might remember this, but maybe 15, 16 years ago, there was a more synchronicity between the rents that landlords were charging and the allowances or the housing benefits, as it was in those days, that people got paid. I just think in the last sort of 5 or 6 years, there's been an increase in demand for private rented accommodation. The supply's what it is, and if you've got a large demand and a limited supply, all that's going to do is push up rents. And the problem that people on benefits have is that those rents are expensive. The allowances don't cover a lot of the time what the actual contractual rent is. And also, we've touched on it, also the other costs in terms of securing the accommodation. And also bear in mind that, you know, that people on benefits are often competing with people who aren't on benefits for the same accommodation. There's more and more people looking to rent privately now than ever before, because it's kind of like a sort of Venn diagram. But if you look at the increase in house prices, which is and issues we're having with people's inability to get mortgages, it's more difficult to get a mortgage, you need a bigger deposit, house prices have increased, that's pushed more people into renting privately who want to live independently. That's increased the demand for rented accommodation. If you've got like a young couple who are working, both in steady full-time jobs, compared to a young couple who aren't working, you know, it's pretty obvious who the landlord's going to choose.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Any other questions?
Well, just one comment that I've experienced, and you may be interested in knowing, but I have a question as well, is I had a lovely family who work, both partners work, and they were allocated a private let before Christmas. But and it was all agreed, signed, sealed, delivered, but when they realised that actually there was 3 children, not the one, because 2, you know, only come at weekends, they withdrew. So again, I'm finding at the moment that private landlords are getting more particular about the size of family, and Gavin's nodding, and I'm sure he'll have come across that. But my question is, many years ago, and Tim, I'm not sure if you were the director then or not, I think under Paul, but a number of years ago, I worked with Paul about, 7, 8 years ago, and we explored the possibility of a foyer, because I used to sit on the foyer board in South Suffolk and things like that for young people, like a hostel. And at the time, I was deeply concerned about bringing something like that into tendering, because I was afraid it would import non-tendering residents into accommodation, if I'm frank. But having said that, I think in the current climate, and with young people having now to stay in some form of learning till they're 18, it may be worth Tendring District exploring a foyer type provision again, because it actually is really good, because they have to participate in education and learning as part of their home thing. You know, there's a compulsory element there. So it's a suggestion that perhaps that is something we ought to explore again as a possibility for 17, 18, 19-year-olds, a foyer-type system, which might fit very well into something that Richard's talking about, for example. You know, it's just a suggestion. You know, we did look at it. We looked carefully at it. The then cabinet member, well, things fell apart, but might be worth looking at. Only you as officers know whether there is that demand there, but I would certainly, from my personal experience, say it may be worthwhile exploring that as an option if we have sufficient people of that age, because I'm deeply concerned about housing, but I'm also deeply concerned about unemployment, and I think both go in hand. Otherwise these people will be a burden, and I hate using language like that. It's emotive because people are human, but they're a burden for the rest of their lives. If they get into the habit of not working at 19, 20, 22, it's going to be very difficult to get them into work by the time. So can I ask that we perhaps as a district council explore that as an option in the future, please? And can you give me an update on where we are on spendles? Thank you, and then I will be quiet, I promise. Thank you. Addressing that to Tim as the director, I think that's right, isn't it, Peter? Do you think?
Yeah, it's fine. I'm happy to take that. I think, I'll be honest, I don't have an awful lot of experience with foyers, but I'm happy to have a look at it, because I think the way you've described it there, Dylan, it does make an awful lot of sense. We can tie that in with the employment and future prospects for people. I think the issue is going to be how it would be funded, and I think sometimes they're funded by with the county council through supporting people funding as it was now, housing related support, or they're actually run by a housing association. So we'd have to look at actually what is it that contributes to the definition of a foyer, what makes a foyer, and then actually how are they funded. We can look at that. I don't think there's any problems with exploring it. And then just an answer to your question about spendles, you're probably aware we've removed the asbestos, so that work is now complete, and we've got a meeting with the team on Thursday this week. Just get an update on the tenders. We've gone out to tender to get a contractor in to do the big bit of work to refit it. So there is progress, definitely. So I can't hear what you're saying now. I think
into hotels. As you know, I've supported the District Council with the spendles proposal from the beginning, much against the interests of my colleagues at town initially, and anger and residents, but I'm very much in favour that it's a much more wonderful solution to people for temporary accommodation spendles than putting them into hotels and things. So, you know,
Thank you, Della. Thank you, Tim. Any more questions? Okay, Mick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just wondering where we are with Jaywick. Have those houses sold down there? Have the houses sold? It's on, isn't it?
Yeah, it's on.
Huh?
No, it's on.
Where we are with the houses at Jaywick, whether they sold or not, and if they haven't, could you not sell them to him as council houses?
Thank you, Mick, for your question. We have had interest in the properties in Jaywick, but they've not sold at the moment. Now, the problem we face is that the funding was provided by, or proportion of the funding was provided by Homes England, and part of the agreement was that they were properties for sale. Now, we have gone back to Homes England, and I don't know if Tim's got an update at the moment, but just before Christmas, we approached them with a few ideas on what to do next because they hadn't sold. So, yes, that's very much on my radar that we had interest, but no, there was no completion on sale. And we have gone back to Homes England with suggestions, and they seem to be pondering at the moment.
Yeah, Jane?
Sorry, mine's not going to be a question. I just want to thank Tim and Peter and their teams and Kathy, because every time I've had a problem and I've come forward to them, I've got the answer and they've helped me sort it out. So I just want to say thank you to you and your team.
Did you want to come back?
On the JWIC.
On JWIC. Tim? Do you want to come back on JWIC?
I think, well, there isn't an awful lot to add over what Councillor Honeywood has said. I think, as he's pointed out, we've engaged with Homes England, because it was actually a number of years ago that we received the grant from them. So I'll be honest, I haven't had a sort of, they've engaged with me, so that we're in correspondence, but I haven't had their sort of final answer yet. I think they're just working out what the grant conditions were. Once we've got an answer from them and they're happy with our proposal, then we can move forward with kind of possible alternatives to the open market sale. But that's what I'll say for now.
Thank you, Tim. Go.
I was just wondering if we could have everyone's email addresses and contact details, if possible, please.
Thank you, Mick. Right, we're going straight into recommendations now. Okay. Do you want me to read that? If you want. Or do you want to do it? No. Okay. Where's the number one?
The Chairman's drafted a recommendation. Do you want me to read it?
Yeah, read it for me.
The proposal to the committee would be that the Cabinet be recommended to pursue with partner agencies measures to, 1, encourage real estate investment trust investment in buying low quality HMOs and investing in them to create good quality self-contained affordable units. 2, signposting those who apply to join the housing register to organisations to support debt management, maximising benefits and overcoming isolation and other issues that they may struggle with. 3, securing additional accommodation for those with vulnerabilities who are rough sleeping. And 4, to continue and develop early intervention with landlords to resolve issues in preference to moving to evictions. So those were your suggestions to the committee.
Right, thank you.
Could we add the forum as well, to explore the forum type thing, please, as a recommendation?
Well,
as Tim said, he was quite interested in looking it up, sorry Tim, you did say you would be quite interested in exploring that option again.
No microphone on.
The forum?
It's a foyer.
Sorry? Graham, you want to say?
Yeah. Could we just say, sorry, in all of the copious amounts of recommendations, was the moving on initiative in that as well? You know, when you move people through, I think which Ivan sort of mentioned, didn't he? And
Sure,
I think
we can add that in.
the others alluded to it as well. Getting a roadmap to get people, to move people on.
Thank you.
Can I say something, John, as well?
Sorry.
I was just wondering, would an all-member briefing benefit all the councillors from some of this as well as a recommendation? Would that go forward or?
No, it's recommendations to Cabinet first. Yeah. No, it's recommendations to Cabinet first,
Right,
I think.
first,
Okay. All right. Okay, so we all agree. Okay, thank you very much, carried. Yep. Can I thank everybody for for coming to see us? It's been great. I didn't know who you were because I'm ignorant, but I do now. I know everybody's got a face to everybody. I see them on paper, but I don't see you live. I don't know which part of the building you hide in, but I'll be able to find you now. Anyway, thank you so much, all of you, and to you, Tim, and to Ivan Briggs. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, can I dismiss them? Yeah. Right, thank you. You can all go home. We'll stay here and slog for it a while longer. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Good evening.
So, Chairman, the final item on the agenda is to put in front of you the proposals from the Cabinet, which they specifically have asked for comment on in respect of what the highlight priorities should be for 2022-23. So in the appendix, you have the Appendix A, which is the corporate plan 2020 to 24. So that sets out the overriding themes for the council and its activities, what should be effectively the strategic direction of the authority over that 4-year period. At Appendix B, you have the highlight priorities, so just those priorities that the Cabinet considered should be specifically highlighted during 21-22, so you can see those, and the initial thoughts for highlight priorities for 22-23. So as I say, Cabinet's put those to you so that you can have a think about those and feedback. Cabinet will then make a decision. As it currently stands, they'll make a final decision on what should be the priorities for 22-23 at their meeting on the 8th of January. So there's the opportunity for this committee to feed back to Cabinet from this meeting. So the highlight priorities are there. They are grouped under the various themes within the corporate plan, and they are for members to suggest whether those do reflect what should be the highlight priorities or suggest alternatives.
Jane.
I think what's written there is good, but I also like what Keith sent out to us in a draft version, and I would like them added also from the pre-meeting. That I wasn't meant to mention.
Okay.
So, Chairman, I think what Councillor Chapman is referring to is a suggestion that perhaps under the delivering high-quality services theme, that there be an additional priority around enhancing the public realm by investing in such areas as weed control and measures to improve the public open spaces, and in the growing and inclusive economy theme, something around within the existing proposed highlight priority for town centres in the district, that the role of towns such as Brightlingsea, Frenton, Walton, Harwich and Manningtree in supporting the economic well-being of the district be recognised, and measures to enhance those town centres and further improve the role in generating a vibrant local town centre experience also be included in 22-23.
And that includes grass cutting, does it?
Not in the town centre.
Right.
Yeah, can I come in?
Yeah.
And also, I think I brought up about the Sport England and Activity Essex. The issue I've got with all of this is the same as the question I asked Councillor Honeywood about homelessness. And he put me to the sustainable communities for the future, and And then something else he said about sustainable. But there's nothing in there about homelessness. It's sort of hidden, if you like. So I would like to propose that we do actually, after the presentations we've had tonight, to actually highlight that. And we should say, well, sorry, I would suggest that we should say, taking on board what Councillor Honeywood has given tonight, that it doesn't seem to reflect what is actually in the corporate plan and what is also the initial thoughts for the highlight priorities. How do you spell fudge? Oh no, sorry, shouldn't I? Yeah.
Because it affects mental health, general health, everything from any one of our residents.
And also on the sports side, it's all very well having items on the corporate plan. It's all very well having items on the corporate plan, but it's a wide-ranging thing like Sport England for physical activity and well-being.
Can we sort of, understand? Can we, take it as one problem at a time, and then we can add them on, if you don't mind?
So obviously, I think the first one is what we've had tonight is the presentation, and I don't think that it's covered in the corporate plan.
Right.
And it's not, and it doesn't appear to be, despite what Councillor Honeywood said, it doesn't seem to be covered in the initial thoughts for highlight priorities. I think homelessness is probably a very important strand to actually hone in on, and some of the things like the different things they've come up with, I think there's a lot of mileage there, about this thing they can take on. That I certainly was never aware of that, and I'm sure. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So that's what I would like to think on that, and then corporate plan. Things have got to be focused. It's very easy to say Sport England and Active Essex for physical activity and well-being. Right. Now that is in the corporate plan. So, but what we need to do, we need to focus in on that. From a personal and parochial point of view, we've got an issue in my ward where we're closing the sports centre, we're going to close, and Bill has got the same. And then there's on the corporate plan, physical activity, they're going to increase it, they want to increase it. Well, we've got to focus in on it and say, let's be specific. If there's monies available there, let's be specific and say, where are we going to target it? Not in Clacton, not in Clacton, not in Frinton Walls, the main centres, but how are we going to spread it out to the smaller areas to make it a pan-tendering initiative, not just in certain areas?
Yeah, I think that's correct. We are all as one. It's all tendering, not just wards. We're being a bit, aren't we? We should really look at everything. You're quite right, Graham.
So, Chairman, I think I think your suggestion was that you move to a vote. So, I think the first one was on the grass-cutting public realm suggestion. Whether there's support from the committee for that?
Thank you.
Yeah. The next one was the growing and inclusive economy around the town centres of, Brightlingsea, Frinton, Walton, Harwich and Manningtree. And what I said about that, is that supported? And then I think that the next one was within the building sustainable communities theme is around homelessness and taking on board the measures that you've discussed this evening and, putting forward to Cabinet anyway. You would like to see something around that in there with some milestones attached to that. So was that supported by the committee?
Yes, sir. Yeah. They've all got their hands up.
And then the final one was on community leadership and measures to support the sport and leisure activity across the district and to encourage activity levels amongst a range of the population, district-wide.
Yep. Okay. That's all.
That's it.
There we go. When we was first elected here, we had Essex County Council before us. They presented us a formula for how they intend to grow school spaces in our area. I think they nearly had a heart attack when I told the guy that we've got 1,000 homes being built over the next few years and they're only going to build one school room over 4 primary schools. They're not coping. I had an email not long ago from someone who was going to buy prospective new property on a new development in my ward, moaning at me, why am I building all these houses when I'm not building any more schoolrooms or school places because he can't get any of his kids into the local schools. So our primary schools could be a bit of an issue. I was also provided with the minutes of a meeting, I think it was from the School of Governors Board at Tendring Technology College, where the head teacher at the time noted that he had 550 applicants for places coming into year 7 and he only had school places for 330, and in that point he also turned around and said, I've got 1,100 houses being built in my area, what do I do? So what do we think on including school placement availability into that last bit as well?
Okay, can we have a proposer and a seconder, please?
I'd say I'm happy to propose it.
Jane. Yep, thank you. Yeah.
Is that accepted by us?
Yes, yep, they all accept. They're all nodding. That's great.
Chairman, I suppose I should just, you've suggested some priorities to go in. Are there any of the priorities that have been identified by Cabinet that you would see as coming out?
Can I just make a comment on that? I'm not quite sure how we would do this. It's about climate change action plans. Obviously, what it is now is because of the cost of energy and the cost of there is a comment now sent on quite a few editions where they're going to, because there is a green levy, if you like, they're already saying that the green levy should be suspended or cut back. So I think that should we make comments about we've got the climate change action plans, but is that going to be affected by public subscription, if you like? Yeah. So is that going to affect? Don't know.
Yeah, it's a valid question to go back to Cabinet. We'll do that. Paul.
Thank you, Chairman. Coming in on the environment part as well, commitments about environmental service delivery. You read that paragraph, it makes for unhappy reading. I think a major problem we have is basically how much stuff we send to landfill, and we do need to work on our recycling across the country. I had heard the government are looking at bringing in some sort of a national scheme. How far down the line that is, we'll never know. I do wonder, though, we have our own recycling programme here in Tendring, and it looks like we're going to look at getting another one. But how effective will that be? Because we can only recycle so much stuff in our recycle boxes. There's a lot of other stuff that can be recycled that we can't take. Should we add something in there along the lines of maybe Cabinet can look at...
That's actually being looked at, but with resourcefuls.
That's being looked at, is it? All right, fair enough, then I withdraw that comment.
Okay.
They're bringing a new thing in, yeah.
Yeah, that's been dealt with now, I think. Okay. Okay, we've got nothing else left to do but go home, so can I let you all go home? You can stay here.
You can, mate.
You want me to sign the minutes, don't you?
I don't.